Hello, 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 and welcome to a brand new episode of Three Drams. As always, I'm your host, Potstilled Matt, Mr. Matt Healy from potstilled.com. As always, I am delighted to have you all here with me this evening. And we are here for a fantastic show. Three brilliant guests with three very different whiskies. Some first timers, some returning to the show. And I think we're going to have an absolutely wonderful time with these different brands and the different whiskies. We are now at episode 16, which is a fantastic achievement for the Three Drams team. And as always, a reminder that I am here to guide you through these whiskies, and you can ask whatever questions you want to these flavor makers and brand creators. But I'm merely a host. It is the O'Donovan brothers behind Three Drams and Irish Malts that do all of the Trojan work, and their team that put this together and get the tasting packs all around the world. And as every month, I do a little roundup of some of the more far-flung places that we do see the Three Drams tasting packs. And of course, we do have friends in Brazil and Japan who tune in every month. Japan, I know our friends there will be tuning in tomorrow morning on the watch back. We also have some friends in Canada, the United States. And I know that today's been a particularly heavy day for us Europeans. So I will say I'll raise a little glass to our Ukrainian friends who do watch usually every month. So to them, to everyone else, I raise a glass and say sláinte. But I think it's time to have more jovial evening of whiskey tasting. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. As I said, we have three brands here. I think two new to the show and one returning. So with three very different flavor profiles, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm seeing a lot of people joining in already in the comment section, letting us know where you're joining us from. I'm seeing, of course, a fantastic representation always from Cork. I'm seeing Glanmire. We've got a number of people coming in from Germany this week. We've got Severus from Frankfurt. Carroll always joining us from Germany as well. We've got Snowy Roscommon. I am lucky, I suppose, today being able to watch a lot of the snow-capped distilleries, be that on the Isle of Arran, the Paris Court Distillery, or the distilleries out west as well, under a bit of snow cap. But thankfully, I was lucky enough to escape here in Dublin. But I know a lot of people had fun in the snow today. I'm seeing Mill Street in Cork, Palmerstown, and more Germany, a great representation in Germany. And we're going to have a lot of fun as we go through. But remember, and of course, we've got our Limerick representation, which will become more evident as to why we bring that up in a few moments. We are going to go through these whiskeys, and always, this is your chance to ask, explore, and let us know when you taste the whiskeys, what are you tasting? We love the taste notes. Everyone's flavor palette are subjective, and it's great to see. And at the very end, do remember that we'll be asking you to rate your favorites whiskeys of the evening. We love seeing the numbers coming in because they're always different. Everyone's palates are subjective, and it's always great to see the differences in opinions and the big standouts for everyone each evening, because there's pretty much in 16 episodes, there's never been one clear winner in the show, and it's always fantastic to see. So I'm seeing lots more people dropping into the comments. Do let us know where you're coming from and how you're enjoying this evening. But of course, if you are posting anything on social media, make sure to use the hashtag 3Drams. Just so the guys from Three Drams and Irish Malts will be able to pick those up and spread the good word of Irish whiskey around the world. But I suppose it's enough of me yammering. It's time to talk about our first whiskey, which is a fantastic first time to the show. We have Carroll is coming to us from Fox's Bow Irish Whiskey. I am really excited to talk about this quite bohemian-style whiskey. So, Alice, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks so much for having me, Matt.
Not a problem. As I said, the production values and everything in the background, it goes to the guys in Irish Malts and 3 Drams. Over 1,800 kits go around the world every month, so it's a serious operation. All I have to do is show up and talk to fun people and drink good whiskey. So it's great to have you on.
Thanks so much. Yeah, delighted to be on. I'm one of the first timers, as you said there, so very excited. And I think this is probably the first time that Fox's Bow is in most of those countries, because we only launched in Ireland just November just gone. So really excited to see, as you said there, a lot of the countries that are coming up and trying Fox's Bow for the first time.
Well, and that is what Three Drams is about. It's to get you guys into the hands of lots of different people, but it's also to bring particularly people who are Irish whiskey fans around the world that perhaps don't have the access to the supplies and stocks and variations of whiskeys get it into their hands as well, which isn't fantastic. Alice, where are you joining us from this evening?
I'm based in Limerick, so we're proudly two Limerick founders. And actually, the name Fox's Bow, for the Limerick contingent, they'll all know it. But for anyone else who isn't familiar with it, it's named after a little side street in Limerick that connects two of the kind of main shopping streets. But it's so small that if you're walking past it, it's nearly a blink and you'd miss it type little archway. But it's traditionally housed kind of creatives of all types through the years, from like seamstresses back in the day right through to kind of more recent times, tattoo artists and foodies and poets and all sorts. So we felt like it was a very appropriate name for a brand like this when we're trying to do things a little bit more creatively and a little bit more kind of that, as you said, actually bohemian feel. So yeah, that's where the name comes from, and that's where we're proudly based.
Well, I'm seeing a good Limerick contingent here this evening. The good few people who've dropped in from Limerick, and John's saying he used to get his haircut in Fox's Bow. So
there you go. Now.
People very familiar. So I never like to start the show without whiskey in the glass. I will take this. This is sample number 1. We're having the glass. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're about to pour into our glass, and then we can talk more about the brand straight afterwards.
Yeah, sounds good. So this is our first release. So it's a blended Irish whiskey, and it's aged in bourbon barrels, sherry butts, and then it's finished in rye casks, which is kind of an unusual trio, I suppose, of finishes in Irish whiskey. And for us, we were really interested in kind of having some type of an influence of rye, whether it was in the ingredients or in the finish. Because I had spent 6 years in Toronto, and my co-founder Tony had spent basically the same period in San Francisco. And we had seen how massive rye was in North America, but it obviously hasn't really had the same influence this side of the Atlantic. And it's interesting to kind of see more releases from Irish whiskies and scotches and things like that with that kind of rye influence. But it's definitely a lot less used, I suppose, than over in the States. So yeah, we knew we wanted to kind of play around with rye and see what the influence would be. So we used a rye cask to finish it. What I think, and I actually love the way you always say, Matt, it's so subjective, because taste is so subjective. So what I might get from this, you might get something completely different and be like, what is she on about? But what I find really exciting about this, and what a few people have kind of said as well, is what you get on the nose is really floral. It's really light. It's fragrant. But it kind of tees you up for something on the palate that you expect to be very similar to that. When in actual fact, on the palate, it's really surprising. It's actually quite spicy. Like, you don't get those floral notes at all come through on the palate. So I think it's quite an interesting whiskey from that perspective. But again, we are trying to very much play into kind of that accessible whiskey. We're purposely priced at €39. So, it's supposed to be something that's there to be enjoyed, drink it however you like. But yeah, it's really like all about accessibility of flavor and price, really.
Okay, so why don't we have I suppose there's a lot of people jumping into the glasses already. I'm gonna have a little nose. I'm gonna take a little sip. Obviously it's your whiskey, but I'll invite you along if you so please. I'll say sláinte.
Sláinte.
It's a very vibrant and expressive nose, isn't
it? Yeah.
I was seeing Matt from the Whiskey Nerd saying lovely sweet nose, kind of like spicy peach jellies. And I actually think it's
interesting. Yeah.
And I have a little sip. So again, sláinte.
Do you see what I mean?
Like, completely different flavor profile than the nose. That's actually that's phenomenal to see the difference in those. And it's layered as well. It's deep, it's rich. There's your sherry influence, and then that little bit of that kind of more rugged kind of rye aspect at the back, which is quite unique.
Exactly, yeah, and that kind of lingering spice as well on the palate, I really like.
I've seen there's a lot of people coming through with expressive flavor notes as well here. Now this is very interesting. And I suppose what was the idea of putting those three casks together? I know you said you wanted to bring rye in, but what led to that kind of discovery or choice of those three different casks?
Yeah, great question. So I suppose I'll actually go back a little bit further and kind of tell you how this project even came to be, because it kind of leads to the answer for that question. So Tony, my co-founder, when he was in San Francisco, he was in a really well-stocked whiskey bar, and looking up at the shelves, he kind of noticed two things. One was that at the time, Limerick didn't really have any representation when it came to whiskey, even though it's the third biggest city in Ireland, and so many amazing cities and towns in Ireland have such great whiskey representation. Now, thankfully, that has changed since he noticed that a couple of years ago. And we do have more representation now with a couple of brands coming out of Limerick, which is great. But I suppose then the other thing that he noticed was a lot of the kind of Irish whiskies that are available or that are a bit more well known, they are amazing in the sense that they kind of champion the tradition of Irish whiskey making in Ireland, and they look at the heritage and the old ways of doing it and kind of our history, our deep and rich history of making whiskey in Ireland. But there's very few brands, I suppose, that are looking at kind of current day Ireland, modern Ireland, contemporary, vibrant Ireland, and creating something that reflects, I suppose, like the kind of Ireland of today, you know, from that sense. So that's kind of what we wanted to do. So we knew with that, when we were talking about creativity and doing things a bit more contemporary and modern and a bit more different, it had to extend to the actual whiskey itself. And we knew we wanted the rye component. So we worked with the team in Great Northern. They're absolutely amazing. And I'd say we were wrecking their heads the amount of kind of different ways we wanted to try it, and even infusing the rye component in the ingredients and things like that. But ultimately, we found that kind of that trio of barrels just works really well together. And as you said earlier, it creates a layered whiskey, but it's balanced. And I think for us, that was the biggest thing, was like reaching that kind of sweet spot of, you know, it being accessible from a flavor perspective, but then having something a little bit niche with the rye finish. So that's kind of why we landed on that trio of barrels. But yeah, I obviously we're delighted with where we ended up, because I think it's I'm obviously biased, but I think it makes for a great whiskey.
Well, I think the comment section is definitely concurring with you there. And when did this launch, and where has it launched?
Yeah, so we only launched in November, and we were planning on launching earlier in the year, but like everyone else, we were subject to all of the delays that COVID imparted, between delays to bottles and caps and all sorts. So our whiskey was sitting there a bit longer than we anticipated, but we finally launched in November. In terms of kind of in-store presence, we're actually only available in Ireland at the moment, but thankfully for John and Robert, they've made it possible for us to be available all over the world. So we're starting to see kind of orders come through in Europe, and some in the US as well, and things like that. So as the kind of word gets out there about the whiskey, and I think, as I said earlier, because rye is so attractive in the North American audience, I think we're kind of starting to see that really pick up now, which is very exciting.
Very good. And I suppose the label then, and the kind of branding around itself, I think you're wearing one of the branded jumpers as well. I suppose what led into that is very playful. It's very vibrant. You know, obviously the kind of neon pink or the hot pink is quite a striking color. What I'm assuming is playing into that kind of maybe bohemianness of the actual Fox's Bow. But how did you arrive in the design element?
Yeah, so we knew we wanted to do something completely contemporary. And I suppose, again, when we think about kind of the big brands in Irish whiskey, the kind of top 3 or 4 that come into your head when you think of Irish whiskey, they generally lean into like green of Ireland or a kind of black of whiskey. So we were like, okay, well, how can we be the polar opposite of what's expected from whiskey? So that's where kind of the neon came from. And then the artwork on the side, we actually partnered with a Limerick artist called John Spade, and he's based out of Hit Studio in London, but he's from Limerick originally. And we kind of tasked him at creating something that captured the essence of modern Limerick. So if you're from Limerick, there are kind of some little nuggets in it that you might recognize, like even the Triple Crown. Obviously, if you're Munster at all, you'll recognize that. But the walls of Limerick, you know, the Three Bridges walk, which is iconic to anyone from Limerick, things like that. There's even a hidden Fox's Bow in there. So yeah, that's kind of how that came to be, which was great. And I think aesthetically, like, a lot of people have made the commentary that we actually look more like a beer than we do a whiskey, which we take as a compliment because we did obviously want to do something very different. So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be.
And obviously a very proud Limerick presence on the label and the branding. In terms of an international strategy, is going to be the exact same in that terms of exporting the pride of Limerick? And I suppose how well do you think that translates? Because you've gone more specific than Ireland. You've gone
I
to a
know.
city and one that lends its name to poetry, but perhaps maybe not the the immigrants of the world coming from Cork, or at least all thinking they're coming from Cork, or so on and so forth. I suppose what's the viewpoint going to the greater world?
Yeah, such a good question. And to be honest, we've kind of played around with that ourselves, because everyone from Limerick would love to, proudly say that Limerick's the best place in Ireland. And I know probably the comments now are going to go against me after that. But in fairness, like, having lived in Canada, I'm under no illusion that, like, when you start talking to people outside of Ireland who aren't that familiar with Ireland, they know Dublin, they probably know Cork, they might know Galway, but like Limerick is way down on the list. Like, I'd always be explaining where I was from. I was like Tourism Ireland should have been paying me, to be honest. But so for us, like, we recognize that. So I think, like, with the name Fox's Bow, we wanted something that Limerick people would recognize straight away, like, oh, this is a brand from Limerick. But that was kind of broad enough that it would travel. Excuse me. So I think when we talk outside of Ireland, we will talk more about how we're trying to kind of channel contemporary Ireland as opposed to contemporary Limerick, just because there isn't as much, I suppose, of a familiarity with the city outside of Ireland as there is in Ireland, obviously. But we still are very proudly Limerick folk. We do plan on ultimately having some kind of a brand home in Limerick, which would be fantastic. So people can really come and visit our city, have an excuse to kind of see how amazing Limerick is and get a taste for the brand in our heart and home. But yeah, it's just kind of the reality, I suppose, at the moment, until we slowly conquer the world, one Limerick person at a time.
And a fair fight too, so fair play. I see Michael in the comments is asking, in or around the Dublin area, if he wanted to get on his 2 feet and go buy a bottle, where might they be able to find it around the Dublin area?
So in Dublin, we're available in the Celtic Whisky shop. We're also going to be soon available in all the Donnybrook fairs, which is fantastic. And then, and hopefully select super values soon as well. But just to give the lads a plug there, if you ever want to get it delivered right to your door, sure, Irish Malt is always handy.
Of course. I mean, what else would you need in your life? Straight to your door service is fantastic. So in terms of the future of Fox's Bow, I know obviously you're establishing yourself now. Is this going to be the main focus of the brand going forward, or will there be kind of shoulder skews that'll complement the selection, or has that been, I suppose, decided at this point?
Yeah, so like the inner whiskey nerd in me, even as soon as we launched the first one, I was already thinking about what I want for the second one. So we definitely will have an innovation pipeline. I think for us, it will always be about doing something a little bit different and kind of, I suppose, a little bit novel within the Irish whiskey category. And it won't be for everyone, because I know there are definitely purists out there that, a product like this might ruffle feathers, but sure, look, that's just the way it is. And to be honest, I think for future releases as well, our main priority would be to make sure it still is always accessible. So, you probably will never see us releasing a Middleton, for example, just from a price point perspective. That's not where we're going to play. For us, it's really about kind of making whiskey really easy to understand and kind of easy to engage with, I suppose, as well. So yeah, you'll definitely see more releases from us over the next couple of years anyway.
Fantastic. And I mean, it's an interesting and very fun project to follow. I mean, whiskey enthusiasts going out and creating their own brand and bringing it to the world, and particularly, bringing the Limerick with you is something that you're clearly very proud of. I suppose for you going forward in such a fledgling and fun brand, what does success look like to you? Like, what is the goal, the plan, the 10-year down the line kind of thing? What's the goal for Fox's Bow?
World domination might seem a bit too aggressive, so I won't say that straight out, but that's what I'm thinking. To be honest, for us, we're kind of looking at some interesting new markets, like, you know, we're even kind of looking at South Africa at the moment. Like there's really cool things happening down there. So I think probably like to have Fox's Bow available and familiar, and a couple of SKUs like that in a couple of kind of interesting new markets, and I suppose really resonate with that kind of new generation of whiskey drinkers who are looking for something a little bit different from the category. And yeah, like that would be kind of the most we could hope for and strive for, I suppose.
Well, absolutely fantastic. Alice, I'm seeing lots of people in the comment section who are loving your enthusiasm, but also loving the whiskey. A couple of people saying that they're loving the idea of ruffling the feathers and going outside the box, and what makes Irish whiskey so interesting. Pardon me. Excuse me. And then Mike D saying he'd love to see a cask strength version of this whiskey, but he understands that, you know, there's a cask strength crusade out there, but perhaps cask strength isn't always for everyone. So there's a fine line to walk. But sure, one release in every now and again in cask strength, there's nothing wrong with that. But he is liking your pink color with the world domination comment for a throwback to Pinky and the Brain. So
I love that. Yeah, very good.
And then a lovely final message of Ted saying great energy for the business of the product, plenty in the dram too. So I think it's absolutely fantastic for a showing with 3 drams, and I don't doubt we'll be seeing lots of you guys on the show, and also hopefully lots of orders. And do remember, guys, at the end of the show, you're going to get a discount code straight to your inbox if you're a subscriber to the 3 drams, where you can buy any one of these bottles at a discounted rate, or there's an additional discount if you buy all 3. And of course, as Alice said, they go straight to your house. And Alice, if you are a whiskey enthusiast of the world that wants to find Fox's Bow online, where should people be looking?
So we're mainly active on Instagram, so at Fox's Bow Whiskey. We're also on Twitter, only recently enough, so come and join the conversation. We're at Fox's Bow Whiskey there as well.
Fantastic. And is there a website that people can look at?
Yeah, it's foxesbowwhiskey.com.
I mean, clear, concise, simple, easy to find. I think exactly. That's all we can ask for in this. Thank you so much, Alice. And remember, guys, let us know in the comments section what you're tasting in this and how you're enjoying dram number 1. Alice, thank you so much for your time. And of course, feel free to wait, sit and enjoy the other whiskeys in the green room.
I will.
You have been a fantastic guest this evening, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Oh, fantastic. So we are jumping on to dram number 2. This is a fantastic whiskey that I am going to be completely biased about because my guest is a returning guest of the show, Mr. Michael Walsh, head distiller of Boann Distillery, showing to us a very interesting whiskey, the Imperial Stout limited edition cask finish batch number 2. Michael, how are you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm very good, Matt. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Now, Alice has set a higher level bar on the enthusiasm for this evening. Yeah. I need you to keep this up. We've got no pink.
No, not quite. Very matte black.
No limerick.
Not
we're gonna do it.
No. I'll do my best, but I suffer from like very bad resting bitch face, so I resort to like looking very stern and very glum. But I'm delighted if I don't come across as enthusiastic. I am delighted to be here all the same.
Oh well, I'm delighted. I have it no other way. So as I said, Michael is our returning guest to the show this evening. I have also going to asterisk this hugely that my opinions in this are going to be completely biased because Michael and myself work together in a professional capacity. But sure, don't mind that. I don't get really a say in. I don't pick the drams, and I don't get a say in which is your favorite. So hopefully, we're going to enjoy ourselves. Michael, you're the head distiller in Boann Distillery, and this is one of the limited edition releases that gets released once a year, about 3,000 bottles. And this is the Imperial Stout Cask Batch 2. I don't know if you have a bottle there to show, or actually maybe
I do.
There you go. So this is ever so slightly different from the batch number 1 bottle. I might pull up the banner again just to show that what the bottle looks like just there. So I'm going to grab this number 2 here. This is Dram Ivor Ga, and we're going to, I suppose, tell us about this whiskey. I suppose it's one that I think some people will be very familiar with. Some people will be completely new to. I know it's a very interesting whiskey. It's a very different whiskey. Why don't you give us a little insight into
Yes,
what?
yeah. So some like you said, may be familiar with is, but this is batch two of our cask, or sorry, our beer cask finish series. So yeah, you did say you were biased on this one. You are, but you're not that biased, because this would have been a very different whiskey if you had your way. So it was one of the first whiskeys when I joined the team at Boann almost 2.5 years ago. We were part of putting together blends, and I think you had a blend put together to put into beer cask finish at the time. It was for batch one, which was into Boann Brewery Imperial Stout casks, but yeah, I decided to go in a different direction, and that's the blend that we have now. This whiskey is one of it's a whiskey that I have a big draw for, because it's so different. Look, I'm the head distiller at Boann. I don't want to be too pretentious and be going down. I'm a flavor creator, but I'm very passionate about creating new flavors every day. We work with a lot of different grain types, and we're trying to push the boundaries as far as flavor is concerned, beyond just the simple view of Irish whiskey being triple distilled and smooth and sweet. It can go far beyond that. The story of Irish whiskey is a lot more complex than that, and this whiskey is I think one of the whiskies that flies most in the face of that just simple, smooth, sweet Irish whiskey style. It's instead gone in a different direction. It's a lot drier, maybe, than what you'd be more familiar with other styles of Irish whiskey, and that was a deliberate act. In working with beer casks can be unusually and probably one of the biggest difficulties is that they don't impart maybe as much flavor profile as you might potentially hope for. If you're comparing using beer casks instead of using something like sherry or even something as high strength as rum casks, they have a greater ability to stand up to the whiskey and impart flavor than something like the beer, which tends to be at a lower ABV. Now, this is an Imperial Stout, so this would have a natural higher ABV than maybe most beers, but it's still not maybe in the same realm as something like sherry or rum. So we started by creating a blend that would lend itself to beer casks. And unusually for Irish whiskey, this blend has a very high proportion of wheat whiskey. The wheat whiskey is very unusual, not to everyone's palate, certainly not in the realm of sweet and soft and smooth. It's quite musty and dark and dry, and it's
like a good porter.
Yeah. And no, I think there was a view we had some in our stocks for blending, and I think the idea was to blend it into certain whiskies to add mouthfeel and creaminess, which it does do. But the flavor profiles are so unapologetically, so in a sense, pungent and strong, that I just wanted to let it take center stage in a whiskey. And in my opinion, no better cask type for it to work with than beer casks. So this blend is a combination of 4 distillates. So wheat whiskey, single grain whiskey, and 2 single malts from 3 distilleries. I'm not sure if I'll get in trouble for naming them, but people can probably guess. There's only about 3 distilleries operating 4 or 5 years ago. So we put together this blend to work with the Imperial Stout. Batch 1 was in Boann Brewhouse casks, but this is in O'Hara's, again an Imperial Stout. So similar to the first, but similar but different. I hope
same but different. So different brewery, different Imperial Stout, and then from obviously working with it, the initial batch 1 was 6 months in the Boann Brewhouse cask, and this is actually 12 months in the O'Hara's casks from memory. So a favorite of mine from the Whistler portfolio, as you said, because of that dryness, Irish whiskies, as you said, tend to be quite sweet. And I think if you distilled down all Irish whiskies into one recipe, this isn't going to be on the recipe anymore.
No, I think that's why I love it. I think again, now I've gotten a lot as the empty bottles behind me will tell the story of. I'm really fond of the Imperial Stout. I always keep a bottle of it to hand. It's very different to most whiskies you're going to get, and so it's good for a bit of when you want something slightly different. Soft and sweet is probably one of the more approachable and pleasant flavor profiles. And we have soft and sweet. We have our Marsala single grain, our Mosaic single grain, and we have sherried single malts. But this is a whiskey that should belong in every cabinet, I think, just for that point of difference, just that dry. You get a lot of like little coffee notes, some like rich. There's a bit of richness in there, dark chocolate as well. But I think what makes it stand out from the crowd is that dryness. And I think of all, something that I'm particularly proud of, given the difficulties to get a beer cask to impart a beer cask type influence into a whiskey, I do think this is in that range. You would pick out and probably hopefully be able to identify that it is in that kind of realm, or getting a lot of character from the Imperial Stout casks from O'Hara's, which is very good in its own right as well.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to stop swirling this in my glass and I'm going to have a little sip. So I'm going to say sláinte. Dry, robust, creamy, chocolatey, kind of coffee notes. A fun one of anyone who likes ice in their whiskey. This is one that becomes like dark, like bitter chocolate with a bit of ice. Incredibly creamy as well for my own personal tasting notes. As you mentioned at the beginning, this is one that I had absolutely predetermined a blend for, and then you took it and made it completely your own. So, I mean, from your point of view, it must be very interesting to see this develop and see the differences between, the batch one, maybe had 3 whiskey styles in it, and different casks, and the batch 2 with the kind of 4 different whiskeys and a different style of Imperial Stout.
Yeah, I know it's been, like I said, been one of, I've been in the industry 10 years now, and it's actually one of the blends, or one of the products I've put together that I've actually surprisingly most proud of, probably because it was more of a risk taken when I put together the blend, or tried to take it. It's not the most conventional. Like I said, it's something I'm very proud of to come back over time. Beer casks, again, you have to be a little bit careful of, because as the whiskey matures and starts to delve deeper and deeper into the oak, it can start to pull, I suppose, character from the cask that isn't sort of the beer. I suppose to explain, the beer won't perforate the oak as deep as other distillate types have. So this would have had beer. Prior to that, it would have had our whiskey, and prior to that, it would have had sherry. So if you leave it too long, you could lose that beer cask influence as the whiskey starts to pull some of those deeper sherry notes through. There are some subtle dark fruits, kind of like chocolatey notes that maybe are familiar as well to sherry type casks in it, but I think that's coming from your Imperial Stout. Your Imperial Stout has its own quirky sweetness to it as well. And if anybody gets the chance to try the O'Hara's Imperial Stout, is quite a good example as well. A beautiful beer in its own right as well.
Exactly, and a lot of comments coming in and questions about that. Exactly. Pardon me, the O'Hara's Imperial Stout. So this was O'Hara's rested their beer in these casks after we've had sherry in them, where they were produced, whiskey in them one round, then the O'Hara's, and then they came back to Boann Distillery, and the whiskey, this blend was put into them for the final aging. Yeah,
it's one of the, I suppose everyone puts, it's one of the things that's I suppose glaringly obvious maybe, but part of whiskey production is product is usually years in you're producing or putting things in line years in advance. So we're already we have a whiskey that's in Lochgill red ale casks, I checked with Peter, I'm okay to say it, but that's batch 3 is coming different. So that will be different to the first two being Imperial Stout. There's a slightly different blend put into that as well to more accentuate the character of the red ale. And again, at batch 4, the casks we have, well, batch 4, batch 5, and batch 6, the casks are with the breweries. So the beer is in cask at the moment. I think batch 4 and batch 5 have beer in at the moment, and batch 6 is lined up. So they won't be seen for years to come, but you're putting the wheels in motion far in advance and having discussions or arguments, as it may have been the case, about what the blend should be for these casks, or what the discussion long before you actually get to have a dram or present a product or a bottle to the general public. And this is one that's quite rewarding. You take, like I said, you take a risk, you put all this work in, and then you hope it turns out. And this is one of the blends that I was most I don't know if concerned is the right word, but was anxiously awaiting the results, particularly because it was one of the first blends I had put together for the Cooney family and the Whistler range as well. So I didn't want to get it wrong the first time. But no, thankfully, like I said, it's not it's maybe not for everyone, and it's the closest probably to a Marmite whiskey that we may have at Boann. But it's one that I always keep a bottle of it to hand. I think it belongs in any whiskey enthusiasts cabinet, just to have that, like I said, that point of difference or something slightly unusual to go back to.
Yeah, as I said, I'm obviously biased, but it's one as well I keep well stocked in good supply, because it's one I have as my personal tipples at home. And as you said, it is an interesting Marmite product, because you know, as you mentioned, developing a blend that complemented the beer sent you down a drier road than perhaps Irish whiskey is generally. And I think if you look at the perhaps the online comments or the reports around the world, it's usually either people's favorite whiskeys or not so much.
Yeah, and like I said, the point, the being flavor creator, like I'd be far more concerned if I was middle of the road and everyone thought it was okay. There are whiskeys in the range that you want broader appeal, but we have a portfolio of, if you start to add in single casks and stuff, potentially dozens, but you have a very broad portfolio here at the Whistler, and of course a very broad range of whiskies available in just the Irish whiskey category. And so this one is unapologetically not for everyone, but the people that like it actually will love it, and that's what it's all about. I hope to make whiskies that stick in people's memories and draw people back as well, and want them to follow the story of this. It's only a limited release, so when it's gone, it will be gone. I don't know how many cases or how well stocked the guys in Irish malts are of this, but batch 3 will be coming along shortly. But like I said, it will be completely different. It's a red ale, but it's something like that. Not every whiskey within the portfolio has to please everyone, and this one may not please everyone, but like I said, hopefully there's people out there that will love it as much as I do anyway, because I'm a big fan.
And I suppose when you're comparing it around the world, do you think there's anything out there that stacks up to it, or do you think that this might be a little bit out on its own?
I think, like I said, I'm sure there's Cask. It's one of the. I think we've done a great job of it as far as the beer cask finish is concerned. I think we've done a great job of doing the beer justice. I'll put it that way. I let it to others. I haven't tasted. I do my best to try and taste every whiskey I possibly can. It is on the drier side. It is on the more unusual side. I credit to the wheat, the wheat distillate as well, that we didn't produce but sourced. It works. It creates all that dryness, that creamy mouthfeel, where the single grain and 2 malt elements, that their job is to pare back that dryness and add a little bit of rich, sweet character to it. So
what's the breakdown in terms of those whiskeys, like in terms percentage wise?
On this one now, it's slightly different to the first, but it's 50% wheat whiskey, 35%. Total is 35% malt split between 2 malts, and then a final 15% grain.
So a complex enough blend in its own right, I suppose. But that's a very, very high percentage of the wheat whiskey. So I suppose that's where you're getting that dryness from.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, look, we were fortunate to be able to source from a few distilleries for our sourced range, and we'll be building in hopefully within the next year. We'll have our own that will come of age as well, so we'll be able to add that to the mix. But yeah, I suppose what's a very important thing for myself on a personal level, I'm not to begin back to like creating flavors and creating new character. I wouldn't just source a distillate from a distillery and release something that potentially been released by somebody else. So we tend to make blends that are a combination of at least two distilleries and potentially more and potentially more distillate as well, just to add, not only to add to the complexity, but add to the point of difference as well. And this one is particularly different, I think, to most that are on the market.
Absolutely fantastic. So if people are looking for this, of course, Irish Malts will drop it straight to your door at the very end of this show. You will get an email into your inbox if you're a subscriber. Just another perk of joining the 3 Drams crew. We'll give you a discount for not only this, but all the whiskeys you are tasting this evening. Michael, if people are looking to find more information about the Whistler and Boann Distillery, is there a website or social media pages they can look up, or even for yourself?
Yeah, so there's Boann Distillery website, there's Boann Distillery Instagram, and there is there's Whistler Instagrams as well. If you type them into your search, you'll get, depending if you want just a Whistler, which are our products, or to follow what we're doing in the distillery. We're doing a couple of interesting things as well that I see some of the names I recognize. Some of the people would have been following along as well, what we're doing from day to day in the distillery as well. So yeah, you can find that on more information on that on our website at the Boann Distillery, or obviously on our social media as well. So yeah, thanks again, and thanks to the guys, the O'Donovans. This is their third time having me on. I met them, the ones like must be 6 or 7 years ago. The two lads are talking about starting it off, and they've done incredibly well, and they deserve all of the success they've had so far because they're very enthusiastic distillers, and guys like myself and yourself need enthusiastic guys like the O'Donovans to make that connection between the producer and the consumer, and they have a great platform here with the 3 Drams, and it's a pleasure to be asked on every time and to be part of it. So congratulate and thank them again for having me.
Absolutely fantastic. Michael, thank you so much for your time, and of course feel free to hang out in the green room, and we'll see you after the show. All right, perfect. Thanks so much. So a time to move on to Dram number 3. Now this, we're coming to the tail end of the show, but I'm really excited about this. Jack Ryan's Raglan Road with Sean Conroy. For me, Jack Ryan is a brand in the first ever tasting I put together for the Irish Whiskey Society many years ago, back in 2013. Jack Ryan was the kind of headline act of it that I brought with it. So a brand I'm loving following. I'm loving to bring back to the show and to welcome Sean. So Sean, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Hi, Matt. I'm sure those typos are deliberate. It's Raglan Road, of course, and it's 54.9%, but we wouldn't trifle over 0.2%. But thanks for having me.
Well, my apologies. I will, as always, I will blame Robert O'Donovan because he's
Absolutely.
The tech head, and as I said, I'll make sure he gives people an extra discount or something on that account.
Good.
But,
look, I know that it looks like there's only 40 minutes left, Matt, so I'll get to the chase. First of all, I'd like to welcome Alice to the whiskey community. That's great to see another entrant into our community, and obviously it's great to hear from Boann. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about Jack Ryan whiskey, and
absolutely.
then I'm going to tell you about Raglan Road, and then you're going to tell me when to stop, because I only stop when the machine.
There's no official cutoff, so you keep going.
Okay, look. The first thing to say is that when we sent whiskey first to the States, I remember the importer, Pacific Edge, in the Bay Area in San Francisco, saying, "You guys were really clever to call the whiskey Jack Ryan, after that TV persona." And of course, we were highly insulted because Jack Ryan was Jack Ryan. Jack Ryan was a person. His father was Thomas, and his son is Yunnan, and his grandson is Declan. There have been 6 generations of the Ryans. So I suppose that's the first thing to say. Jack Ryan's a real person, and it's a family business. So what do we do? We are, I suppose, independent finishers and bottlers. We've got our own bonded warehouse, and we bottle our own whiskey. And we've assembled casks over the years. We've a lot of casks now, and we marry, basically we marry aged malt with interesting casks. And as we say in all of our media, we go for classic and eclectic and novel finishes. And all of our whiskies are single malt Irish, and they tend to be older ones. In fact, the Raglan Road is unusual in that it's a 5-year-old. We have a lot of whiskey in cask that in fact will be 15 years of age in a couple of weeks' time. And our releases to date have all been 10 years and older. So this is actually a bit of an unusual release for us. But what it isn't unusual in is in the direction we've taken, which is basically we regard ourselves, if you like, as artisanal. We're finishers. We're not distillers. We're finishers. And all of our releases are relatively small. The 12-year-old, which is, I suppose, the anchor whiskey, there may be 20,000 bottles of that. The others tend to be 3,000 to 4,000 bottles. So they're small releases. And indeed, we've also started a thing we call the Ryan Cask Elite Finish, which is single casks. And in the last several years, we've come to think that really we're about collaborations. So, for example, we released a whiskey, Tumivara, one of the whiskies. Tumivara, why? Because Thomas Ryan came from Tumivara. And in any event, Tumivara was finished in Calvados, but it wasn't just finished in Calvados. It was finished in Chateau Dubois, Calvados from Normandy, which we sourced, casks we sourced from Didier Bédoux. He's retired now. But in other words, we're big into the provenance. And we think it adds to the story, and it adds to the artisanal feel to the whiskey. Of course, it has to taste good as well, but you know, we like that. In the case of another of the whiskies, Finisher's Touch, by the way, Tumivara and Finisher's Touch and Haddington are part of what we call the Generation Trilogy, just to celebrate the 6 generations of Ryans. The Tumivara because Thomas was from Tumivara, and the Haddington because Thomas set up his whiskey finishing at the Beggar's Bush pub on Haddington Road. So that's why, and Finisher's Touch is what we think Jack himself developed. So if you like, you get the historical thread from Tumivara through Haddington to Finisher's Touch, and I'll talk about the connection with Raglan Road in a moment. But the Finisher's Touch, for example, we got first use bourbon casks over from Lexington, and at ridiculous expense because we're a bit silly and maybe a bit passionate, we sent those casks to Madeira Island, to Juan Teixeira of Justino's, and we got Juan to season the casks with 3-year-old Swedish Madeira, and then we brought the casks back and we filled them with our own whiskey. So when I say that we produced Finisher's Touch, I mean we produced it. We didn't distill it, but we put good whiskey in casks that we owned and we sent off and we got back. And so there's a fair bit of attention to detail. Raglan Road is a bit unusual, and I heard what Michael was saying about the difficulties with a beer finish. We hadn't done a beer finish before, and yes, ours is finished in Imperial Stout too. It's a single malt finished in Imperial Stout. We've bottled it at cask strength. We originally intended to bottle it at 46%, but our taster really liked it a lot and wanted us to bottle it at cask strength. He felt it worked at cask strength, so we tore up the 46% labels and we bottled it at 54.9. There are only 3,500 bottles, just to say that, but we like it. And the story, well, what's the story? Well, there's a brewery in Monaghan. It's owned by Seamus McMahon, and it's called Boann Brewhouse. Some people may know of it. And Seamus is generations in farming in a place called Dunelty or Dunelche in Monaghan. And he's developed a brewery there. And maybe you'll begin to get the connection for the name, because just across the fields from Dunelty is Inishkeen, where Paddy Kavanagh came from. And of course, Paddy Kavanagh came from Monaghan to Dublin, and Paddy Kavanagh hung around Haddington Road and other places. Indeed, if the truth be known, Paddy Kavanagh may well have been barred from the Beggar's Bush, because he was barred from plenty of places. I'm sure he was let back in. But in any event, we saw the connection there. Thomas Ryan set up on Haddington Road, and this is a collaboration between Jack Ryan Whiskey and Boann Brewhouse, Seamus McMahon's Boann Brewhouse. And so we felt the name was a natural. And I tried to weave some phrases from Paddy Cabinet into the back label, which of course I'm ridiculously proud of. Maybe you like it, maybe you won't. And the story behind it is we sent casks up to Seamus McMahon to brew his Imperial Stout in, and he brewed, to put his Imperial Stout in. His Imperial Stout is also called Raglan Road, and it's either released or about to be released. It's 8.8%. And of course, one of the things that wasn't mentioned about the difficulty with finishing a whiskey in a stout cask is that, of course, as well as the lower alcohol percentage presenting a challenge in getting the flavors, it presents a challenge in preventing infection, and bacterial overgrowth. So we were so paranoid about these casks that the planning was like for a campaign, not a campaign now like the current one being waged by that little man in Moscow. But we planned the logistics carefully in that we got the casks up to Seamus. He put his stout in it, and the day that the stout came out of the casks, we picked up the casks in Monaghan, brought them back to our warehouse, and filled them with whiskey. So really, the same day that they were disgorged of the Imperial Stout, we put our whiskey in them, and so that way I think we kept them safe. And we had sweetened the whiskey a little bit by putting it for a few weeks in Madeira. Some of the casks we took back from Funchal in the Madeira Islands,
Yes.
because we were aware that it's not simple, it's not easy to get a nice finish from a beer or any type of beer, and certainly not from a stout, because there's always the risk that in fact the flavour you'll impart will be of a stale pint, and it has happened. And indeed the successes, as I'm sure Michael will tell you, aren't all that many. In fact, I know that he mentioned finding a blend of whiskey that would set off the stout. Well, we didn't, I suppose. We stuck with the single malt, and we just tried to ensure that the stout added to it. We didn't really fiddle with the single malt at all. And we think that it's a bloody good whiskey. We do enter all of our whiskies for peer review in competitions, etc. The 12-year-old won an Irish Whiskey Award and a gold in San Francisco. And Tumivara won the double gold in San Francisco. Bodega, that was finished in an Oloroso sherry cask as well. The cask that won a silver in San Francisco, and Haddington won an Irish Whiskey Award there last year. Pro Finisher's Touch was kind of COVID bound, but we'll enter it in something, and we'll certainly enter Raglan Road, because of course we want to hear what people think of it.
Well, actually, on that, I'm gonna say Sláinte, because I've got a glass that's itching to be imbibed upon. So I'm gonna say Sláinte.
Yeah.
I'll have a little nose, and please continue. And I'll invite anyone who hasn't imbibed yet to join me. And Sean, please continue. I'm delightfully interested.
Yeah, actually, our taster waxes lyrical about this whiskey. Although I'm equipped with a superior proboscis, I'm not actually very good at describing taste. And indeed, when our taster writes his notes, I'm never sure whether to enter them for the Nobel Prize for Literature or to put them on the label in the back of the bottle. But certainly, he identified a lot of flavors in it. I'm not going to insult you by telling you what he found there. Whiskey is like a beautiful woman or man. It's what you find yourself, and we hope that you find something in it that attracts you. We certainly put a lot into it, and hopefully you'll get a lot out of it.
Absolutely, it's very expressive, very flavorsome, and again, I'm again a little biased with this brand, because it was one of the first brands that I had ever on my own tastings. I love the packaging. Is a thing for me. It's classic and distinctive, and even the tubes. I don't know if you can show us one of those tubes you have.
That's the interesting thing for us anyway about it was that our taster surprised us, and as I say, we had the labels printed already. expense. When he insisted that it was good at cask strength and he didn't want it brought down to 46%. Most of our whiskies, other than the actuals expressly cask strength released, are 46%. This is cask strength. So yeah, that was unusual for us, and I suppose it does actually work at cask strength, all right. And yes, it's definitely interesting, and we feel that the little bit of sweetening with the Madeira before the brand brewhouse casks came back did perhaps take some of the roughness, or, well, for want of a better word, staleness that can happen with with a stout finish, especially as we were working with a single malt that we weren't going to mess with in any way. So it had to work with the single malt because we weren't going to do anything to the whiskey. So anyway, we certainly hope that you like it.
Oh, I do, and the comment section is lighting up with people who are very fond of this. John saying, "My God, Jack Ryan Raglan Brothers, outstanding, well done." Neil in Germany saying, "Incredibly tasty, very intense." Tonio Carroll dropping in saying he picks some licorice on the palate, which is fantastic. And again, everyone's tasting notes and palate are subjective, so it's great to see the different, and you're pulling them out as you go. And a lot of people will find different things. Alan saying it's beautifully rich dram with a long lingering finish and it's top notch. And then Marissa saying that she gets a taste of marmalade, raisin, and a bite of licorice and saltwater taffy. And I think
our taster mentioned some of those as well. By the way, I know you have a lot of people on from Germany, even though there are only 3,500 bottles. Max Peel in Hamburg, they have it, and I know Big Spirits in Austria have it. Magnum, believe it or not, in Calgary, in Canada have it, and obviously a small number of distributors of quality whiskey, quality Irish whiskey. It's not everywhere, not with those small numbers. We tend to stick to the smallish releases, and of course, Ali obviously has it in a Celtic whiskey shop, and a fantastic, if I may say so, also a fantastic supporter, like yourselves. People in the whiskey community love what they do, and it's nice to work with people who love what they do.
Exactly, and I'm sure the guys in Irish Malts and 3 Drams, if you're anywhere in the world that doesn't have this on the shelf, you'll get it directly. Well, I suppose even if it has it on the shelf, it will still get directly to your door, assuming it is legal to do so, because I know there's a few US states that don't allow it, but pretty much everywhere else in the world, they'll get it to your door in a couple of days. So when you're taking these whiskeys, you're in, I suppose, the Jack Ryan warehouses, because I know, if I'm not mistaken, you and yourselves have your own bottling line as well.
Yeah.
Under Cult Drinks. I suppose, what's the creative process? Do you find a whiskey that you think would be perfect for a certain type of finishing, or do you start on the far end that you need a whiskey at a certain price point and you work back, or what's the creative process?
Yeah, to be honest, Matt, we're sitting on a fairly big volume of whiskey that'll be 15 years of age shortly, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And I think we will stick with this. I certainly don't mean this to sound pompous. It's just the way it is, because that's what we have. Higher end, finishes. And yes, we look for classic. We'll probably release some 15-year-old bourbon. We look for a little bit eclectic. I mean, we even explored, until we were warned not to go near it, a Kirschwasser finish, because no one's done it and survived to tell the tale. So, we're prepared to have a look at it. And,
of course.
And we were a little bit wary of this stout finish, but we keep, I suppose, it's more the finish that we're thinking of. We hope that we'll be finishing quality aged malt, that'll be the bedrock.
Of course.
So having established that that's what we have, we look for an interesting finish, interesting casks, but also collaborations. When we collaborate with a producer who's happy to have their logo incorporated in the label. So the Tumivara has the Chateau de Bois in our label. Justino's has theirs, etc., and Brand Brujas have theirs in this, and we've kind of gone that direction. And I think we'll say that direction. Our first single cask release was from a Finca museum, Rioja, and we have that as well. So I think that is the route we'll take. But we also have something that is maybe ready now in Vino Santo wine from Tuscany. And I get to play with the names and the stories. And of course, Vino Santo is holy wine, and Ishkabaha is water of life. So if you have anything interesting by way of creative ideas for names, etc., please feel free to throw them at me after the show.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting to hear the creative process in that kind of collaboration world, because obviously Justino's is I suppose in the spirits world such a famous name, a famous house in Madeira. Chateau de Bois, if you know Calvados, it's on the western side of the world, Calvados a little lesser known. You get to the eastern side of the world, so much more famous. But Chateau du Bois, one of the most famous Calvados houses. Didier Bedou, as you said, he's retired now, but a famed manager and a Calvados maker. You can't really, in their respective markets, get much more prestige than those two companies.
And Seamus McMahon, is passionate. Brand Brewhouse, like he really is passionate about both his farm and his brewery. In fact, it's a brewery developed on a farm. He put up a photograph on one of his social media pages last week, and it shows beer in a warehouse or shed, and beside the beer are bales of hay. And I love it. We know exactly where our casks went, and we know exactly who's looking after them, and we like that. We just like that.
Exactly, it brings a new meaning to grassy notes in your beer, anyway. If people were looking to find more information online about Jack Ryan, is there a website they could look at?
Yes, no more than for Alice and Michael. But by the way, Thomas's grandfather John worked in the 1820s in Walkers in Limerick. Limerick has a history of whiskey as well. So
I see
Alice
Alice nodding
history.
vigorously.
She's reviving history, and it's great to see it revive. Walkers, and I think that his son Michael worked in Birches in Rossgrey, and then of course Thomas set up his finishing business in Nottingham Road. But no, we're on social media like everybody else. We're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Jack Ryan Whiskey we're not hard to find, and we have a website, of course, as well.
Perfect. And is there any particular countries that we should be keeping an eye out for that you haven't mentioned? The whiskeys on shelf, or perhaps any timelines on new releases we should be keeping an eye on? One of these 15-year-olds you've been mentioning.
Well, no, we have a couple of big meetings coming up to see what the next. Raglan Road is the 10th release. It's our 10th.
Okay.
Release since 2013. It's our 10th release, and we're happy, obviously, with the prizes and the peer review, and we're committed to carry on with that, the blind taste testing type of competitions. I think this year we'll probably release 2 or 3 more single cask releases like the Finca. And I think this Raglan Road is unusual for us because it's a 5-year-old. It's not a 10-year-old plus. We probably release a 15-year-old, but this Vino Santo will also be probably a 6-year-old, and it might be interesting. That will probably come out under whatever name I give it at some stage during the year as well.
Fair, yeah, not a problem. And I suppose we'll tell people to keep an eye out after the show, of course. Actually, about 4 minutes ago, everyone who is a subscriber to 3 Drams will have an email code into their inbox to tell them that they have a discount code to buy not only your whiskies from the Jack Ryan range, but of course all of the whiskies we've tried tonight in a discount capacity, because as you say, Sean, we want to get it as many people around the world straight to their door. And of course create advocates and fans and enthusiasts of the Jack Ryan range, because I am one and have been one for quite a number of years. What year did you say was the first release?
Well, Thomas used to finish whiskies way back in 1913, but the revival of and Jack did it until Jack died quite young of a heart attack. But really, it was revived by you and on in 2013. Let's face it, the revival of Ryan's Malt, as it used to be called back in early 20th century Dublin. The revival was 2013.
Okay, well, I would then like to think I might have been an early fan, but I'm still a fan to this day, and I do implore anyone who is interested to pick up a bottle of this, because as I said, I'm a very big fan of the quality of Jack Ryan. And Sean, thank you so much for your time this evening, and I hope everyone enjoys picking up their own bottle of Jack Ryan and sampling along with us.
For the day that's in it, more whiskey, less war.
Exactly. More whiskey, less war. I like that. I think that's a saying I'm going to live by for the next little while. Thanks so much to everyone watching, and of course to all of our guests, Alice, Michael, and of course Sean. To everyone watching at home, you've been fantastic. Let us know in the comments section what have been your favorite whiskeys this evening. You can rank them. You can tell us your biggest standout, whatever it is. It's always fantastic to see what your favorites are. Remember, in your email inbox, there is a discount code for anyone that wants to purchase a bottle, 2, 3, to go straight to your door. And a very big thank you to not only the O'Donovan brothers who make this all possible. Over nearly 2,000 packs every month go all across the world for these tastings and watching back. But also the Irish Malts and 3 Drams team that do, apart from the O'Donovan brothers, who do Trojan work, the rest of the team as well to be recognized for doing an immense amount of work, not only keeping presenters like myself in shape, but also getting samples to the places they need to be decanted, bottled, and sent across the world in time. Thank you so much. I'm seeing so many different answers here. Sean, you'll be delighted to see I'm seeing a lot of 3s coming up first as people's favorites. And as I said, I love the subjective taste. They're always different. But to everyone out there, thank you so much. To everyone who's watching after the fact, I hope you've had a great time watching in and enjoying. And to everyone else, have a lovely evening. And thank you and good night.